So, welcome to another Big Jimny video. Not the video I thought I'd be producing at this point. If you remember, a couple of weeks ago I said that it should be in the restoration workshop by now. Unfortunately, we are caught behind a old Land Rover restoration, so that's in front of us in the queue. And as those of us who are Suzuki owners know, there's nothing worse than being caught behind a slow, old, rusting, lumbering Land Rover when you want to just get on and get going. Unfortunately, that's what we are. We're stuck behind the Land Rover, although we now have a scheduled start date of the 10th of October. So hopefully on the 10th of October, the Land Rover rust would have been brushed away and thrown on the scrap heap, and the Suzuki restoration will start. So, in this video, I'd like to cover a subject that I mentioned earlier on in one of my other videos around the collecting together of the parts to ensure that when the restoration actually goes ahead, that we've got the parts to actually do it with and we don't end up getting stuck in the restoration period like the Land Rover did. So I have been acquiring parts over the last few weeks and just wanted to take you around how I did it, because it's turned out to be quite difficult to get hold of some of these parts. James's SJ is a 1986 one, which means in the SJ cycle it is fairly early on. And they actually changed some of the parts from the early ones to the later ones. Getting hold of the parts for the earlier ones is getting more difficult. They're either out of stock or just completely out of production everywhere now. And unfortunately, it's proved quite difficult to get some of the actual proper original parts. So if you recall, on James's SJ, the front wheel arches round the extension for the wheel arch, the little wheel arch extension flanges, were completely corroded away, and the restorers were concerned about the wing underneath the rusted away flange and suggested that we really ought to look at getting new wings in their entirety, particularly as there's some other soft spots underneath the wheel arch. So to get a new wing would be much more cost effective than building from scratch. So unfortunately, the wings have turned out to be very difficult to get hold of. If you look at James's SJ, you can see that it's got the narrow wheel arches, which was what the earlier ones had fitted, and in fact it's not much more different than the Japanese K car. So we tried all the usual sources, first of all obviously Suzuki themselves, and then Megazip and Partsook and all these different suppliers. And despite some of them saying they had them in stock, it turned out that when you put in your order they sent your money back and said, sorry, no longer manufactured. Now I know, and I'm sure that you would tell me in the listing at the bottom of the underneath here, that you've managed to get hold of them either from India. Now I can see some Maruti ones listed for the narrow wheel arch versions, and I suspect that in Japan some of the sort of more specialist K car parts people have probably got them. But when we looked at those, the price was completely and totally extortionate. However, I noticed on an American website that it said, who had the later wheel arches in, it did say that they can be modified to fit the earlier vehicles. So we then started on an exploration to find out exactly how they can be modified. So what I did was I ordered one wheel arch because I didn't want to spend all my money on something that was completely useless. So we bought one wheel arch and I took a look at it to see how it could be modified. And it turns out to be apparently very simple. So if we take a look at the wheel arch, and I'll take you through what I think the modification is. Looking at James's narrow wheel arched version of the car, you'll notice that there is a decorative indent in the panel here, and that the wheel arch itself, the extender, doesn't start to below, whereas this is a samurai or wider wheel arched Jimny wide, or whatever you want to call it, wheel arch. This is the only ones that are now available in sort of as new condition, and you'll see it's got the much bigger holder fitted to it. So the basic idea was to buy one like this and then find out if it actually had the decorative indent around it, because that would be very hard to reproduce, but it needed to be there for accuracy. So I bought this wheel arch here, and as you can see on the inside of the panel is the pressing dent, the indent that it requires for the decorative trim setup that the narrow wheel arch, the 413 that James has got. So it is going to be apparently a fairly straightforward job to remove the spot welds for this arch and put on the narrower wheel arch extender. Now, the narrow wheel arch extenders are another story again. Here is one of them, and these have been really difficult to get hold of. Okay, it seems that Suzuki doesn't do them, Japan and all these places haven't got them. Everywhere's out of stock, but I have managed to find a source of these. The links in the YouTube title below will tell you where all of the parts I got them from, and therefore enable you to buy them. But we did manage to find the narrow ones. So as you can see, this is much smaller and narrower than the Samurai ones, but I have been assured that we can just take the spot welds off and put this one on, and away we go with the wider arches for the here is a rear one, the rear wing. These are much easier to find for some reason. They're around, as are the narrow arches to fit on them. The only thing to watch with these is that you can save money. You can either end up buying the panel itself and the wheel arch extension separately. They've got separate part numbers, or you can buy the same part number but with the word assembly in the title, and the assembly comes with the wheel arch. The only thing to watch there is that it isn't actually assembled. This one here is been purchased as an assembly, and as you can see, they come separate. So you've still got to weld it on. It isn't actually assembled, but at least for the rears, the wings and the narrow wheel arch holders are available off the shelf. So we managed to get hold of these, and this is a much simpler task. And it's the same for the other side. We bought the wheel arch and the wing together. Although this one didn't actually come as an assembly, I had to buy them separately, which meant I paid slightly more for this, because you had to buy the narrow wheel arch holder separately. Also on this side, you've of course got the fuel filler, which is in fact welded in. So you had to buy, we are going to have to cut out the old filler, and again the restoration company said that was probably going to end up really destroying the filler, particularly as it had rust on ours in here anyway. So they said get a new one. Again, this was a little bit harder to find. A few places said they hadn't got it, but fortunately these are in fact common across the Suzuki range. So LJs, this is actually an LJ81. LJs and SJs had the same filler setup. The only thing that varied is the emissions pipework that you can see here on the system. So the emissions thing was slightly different, but they have said when I spoke to the people, all you can have to do is, if it is wrong, which it won't be, it actually turns out to be the right one for this car, is just change some of the pipework over from the old one to the new one, which is not such a problem. So it looks to me like we have got very nearly on my lawn here a complete SJ ready to build. Well, with a bit of luck, the next time you see a video or pictures from us, it should be representing the build. As I said, it starts on October the 10th, so hopefully we'll have some information and some pictures and that coming back by the end of that week that we can start sending out to you. In the meantime, if you like this video, then please consider subscribing. Like and subscribe using the links in the video, and we'll catch you further down the road.